Hi, welcome to the Kind Faith. This is a message for the weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means so much to us that you do. Please let us know you're here. Hit the like button, make a comment. We would love a comment in the comment section below, or subscribe. We would love it if you would subscribe. So thank you for being here. We've been talking about forgiveness and moving our way through the stages of forgiveness. The first one is to humanize. The second one is to release the right for vengeance. We talked about that last week. And the last part of forgiveness is allowing our feelings to change. And that is, for me, the hardest concept. I began to really wrestle with this when I heard a sermon from John Ortberg. He picked up the Lord's Prayer. He was preaching on the Lord's Prayer. And he got to the last part of the Lord's Prayer, where it's forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And I had said it over and over and over again, right? But I hadn't really thought about how that part of the prayer was structured. Forgive us our debts as we forgive. And John brought this to light. He said, it should be interpreted this way, or could be interpreted this way. Lord, may you think, feel, and act toward me the way I think, feel, and act toward people who've hurt me. And that blew my mind. God, would you think, feel, and act toward me the way I think, feel, and act toward the people who've hurt me? And it blew my mind on 2 points. The first point is that this whole concept of forgiveness can be merely transactional, right? It can be merely an event. And it is, at its heart, the gospel is at heart, the event of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And that death where Jesus puts to right and sets us in right relationship with God is the event. And I can take that event and I can look at the people who've hurt me and say, I forgive you. And it's a transaction. It's a simple action. And I perform it, but if I'm really honest, nothing about my feelings have changed in that process. How do I change my feelings? And honestly, don't you want God to have his feelings change? Don't you want that to change? And so how do feelings change? Now, I sure don't want God to just say, well, I forgive you, but I still feel angry or frustrated or disappointed or sad. I want feelings to change. So how do feelings change? And it got me thinking of a story that I've told a bunch of times, but drilled the story deeper. I love to ride a bike. I love to ride a road bike wearing spandex. It's a beautiful thing in my mind. And people who drive cars and you're on narrow roads, they generally don't like you because it's their road. At least that's what I tell myself and that's what I think. And every now and then someone will drive by and yell at me. But here's the interesting thing. When they yell, I can't hear anything. I've got wind in my hair. I hear the car noise coming by. And when I hear all of that and someone drives by and yells, all that really comes to my ears is, oh. But I immediately tell myself a story. I immediately tell myself this story. They're angry that I'm on the road. They think they have complete right to the road, and they're yelling at me because I'm in their way. That's the story I tell. Do I have any evidence that that's actually what's going on? Truthfully, no. All I heard was, oh, which could be, you look fantastic in spandex today, right? it could be that, but I tell myself a story. If I told myself the story, they're cheering me on, my feelings are completely different. But I usually tell the story, they think this road is theirs and they're mad at me for being in their way, and so I get angry. I have a right to be here. I pay taxes too, blah, 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 blah. All that goes on. Our stories and the stories we tell are deeply connected to our feelings. And here's what God does. If you've got a Bible, pick up Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians chapter 2 is this incredible theological tour de force. It talks all about what God has done. And so often we get stuck in the huge theology of Ephesians chapter 2. But I want you to listen in a different way. I'm going to read through it. And as I read through it, I want you to listen for the stories that are told, the images that are captured in the passage, the metaphors that are used. Listen for that as we read through this passage. Try not to let yourself get caught up in all of the theological statements and conclusions to be drawn in this passage. So here it is, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. And you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you once walked, following the curse of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, craving the desires of the body and mind. We were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together in Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised up with him and seated with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved, through faith. It's not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. Do you see the metaphors here, the stories, man? There's so many famous verses here. It's hard not to get wrapped around the beautiful axle of them. But listen to the stories. The first one caught me right off in the very first line. For you were dead in your trespasses and sins in which you once walked. There's a story about me that's true, that I had been set here to follow a path, and I followed a different path. I decided to wander off it and step into areas that weren't mine. There's another story being told. There's a prince of the power of the air which you follow. There's a power that I'm following. So it's not just about a path, it's about this power that's everywhere in the air. It's Satan, and I followed. And then the other story that catches me in this, and there's probably more here, but I love the way this is said in verse 3, among whom we once all lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of our body and mind. And we're made children of wrath. Whoa, children of wrath. What a wild connection to put together. How many times do you think of children as worthy of or receiving wrath? Punishment, yes. Frustration, for sure. But wrath? And there's a story that as children, we had no place. We were children of wrath and despair and wandering. All of that's true. And all of it is connected to our behavior. And look what God does. God doesn't dismiss the truth of it, right? Forgiveness isn't about dismissing behavior. And it's not about changing the facts of the story. But look at what God does in verse 4. But God, being rich in mercy, but God made us alive together with Christ. And if you continue to read, you notice that God chooses to speak a different story over us. And feelings change when we speak different stories. What stories have you been telling about the people in your life who've hurt you? I know I have stories that I tell. And my challenge in this passage, and it's a challenge to you as well, is to practice forgiveness, to change the story. Don't ignore the past. The other stories are just as true, but the story you tell now is different as you work to practice forgiveness. And when the story changes, the feelings change. The most powerful illustration of this for me was Marcy and her dad. When I met Marcy, she did not have a great relationship with her dad. I asked her if I could share this, by the way, and she said yes. So we met, and they had a very fractured relationship. And then I met her dad, and I completely understood why. He was so cruel to this woman I loved, and it created so much anger and frustration and bitterness in me about him, and in her too. And she began this process as he started to fail in his health of forgiving him. My first reaction to that was, why would you do that? But I understood we're commanded to forgive, to love our enemies, and the way we express love is to offer forgiveness. And so she began this process of forgiving, and as he got sicker and sicker, she would spend hours driving to him and spending time with him in the hospice care facility that he was in. And I still had bitterness, and I still could remember all the events, all the scarring, all the stories she told me of him, and all the ways I'd observed. And so I had all these stories built up in my head about who this man was. And there was this moment where I was pushing in on her on why, because, well, selfishly, it was inconvenient at this time that she was heading up to be with her dad. And she looked at me and said something that was so profound. She said, he did the best he could with what he was given. I didn't understand the significance of the moment, but she changed the story. She has not denied any of the hurt that he had bestowed upon her. She had not discounted it or dismissed it or said, oh, it's all of that still was true, but she changed the story and offered real love and forgiveness in so doing. And as she changed the story, I watched her feelings change. So if we're going to be people who operate in the love of Christ, we've got to practice forgiveness. We've got to humanize and release the right for vengeance, and we've got to start choosing different stories to speak over these people we're forgiving. God did it. He changed the story. He speaks over us. We need to do it too. So in this season where we celebrate Christmas, let's take out the stories we've been telling about the people we need to forgive, and let's intentionally choose to change them. Thank you so much for being here, for listening. Our prayer for you is that God would help you forgive and love and humanize and release vengeance. We're going to keep digging in as we move into Christmas, previews of coming attractions. We're going to dig into this and talk about forgiveness in light of the Christmas story. And so we hope that you continue to join us and let us know. Let us know what you think. Let us know your responses. And even we'd love to know what we could do better and how we could help you more. So God bless you and have a great rest of your week.